The views expressed in this podcast do not represent the opinions or ideas of Radio St. Rose or the College of St. Rose.
Hi, I'm Alan Hills, and welcome to the College of St. Rose's movie review and discussion podcast series, Cutting to the Chase, brought to you by the campus radio club, Radio St. Rose. So the topic of this episode is the new Netflix original film, The Highwaymen, which tells the story of the two former Texas Rangers who were hired by the then governor of Louisiana to hunt down the vicious criminals, Bonnie and Clyde. And my special guest today is a communications major here at St. Rose with a concentration in film and new media, and he's a member of St. Rose Television, and we all call him The Change. That's his big nickname here. We usually all have nicknames here, but we call him The Change because he is Chris Nichols. Chris, thanks for being here, man. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So yeah, you and I recently watched The Highwaymen. It's like a brand new release. So I'll ask you this just to get it started. What are your thoughts on it?
So I have a lot of thoughts on it. It's hard to kind of put into one word. I liked it. I liked some aspects of it, but the same degree I didn't like a lot of aspects of it. It was kind of back and forth. What about you?
Yeah, I just thought that the severity of the subject matter was, a little understated. I mean, Bonnie and Clyde were two very vicious criminals, and I felt that the tone of the movie felt a little understated, and it felt a little bland. I guess, what I'm saying is that I didn't feel that there was a big sense of, urgency given the task at hand and what they had to do. I realized that they're two retired Texas Rangers, and, they're not used to going back to that lifestyle, and they have doubts that if they can do it. And, plus, most people down south treat them like Robin Hood figures since, it is the Depression, and there's a lot of hate going around, and the people kind of like them because of the crimes they're committing, because they're giving them, Bonnie and Clyde are giving them all the money and stuff like that. But yeah, they had a lot of challenges to face, and for that reason alone, I think that the tone of the movie was a little too calm. It was a little too, it was just a little too bitter, and I think there should have been a little more intense excitement, given the subject matter. I don't know how you feel about that. It wasn't exciting enough.
Yeah, I honestly 100% agree. I just thought the story was a little slow moving. I mean, you're right. It was a great, I think the plot, was great. I mean, tracing down Bonnie and Clyde, that's very, very cool in my opinion, But yeah, like you got it. It was just a little slow, a little bland at some points. I think it took a long time to kind of build up to those important parts. And we only see one kind of almost I guess action scene, if you will, when they're driving around in the dirt and stuff and trying to shoot at Bonnie and Clyde. But that was really it. It was kind of just slow moving, a little bland.
Yeah, it was a little too bland. But the thing is, I'm kind of hypocritical when it comes to the tone of the movie because, since we're both film majors, we should be touching base on this subject. I thought the cinematography was, absolutely amazing.
It was beautiful. Yeah,
I mean, given that, it is the South, there's a lot of flat land in the South, and when you film a lot of scenes during a certain time of day down in that climate, I shouldn't say climate, down in that landscape, when you film wide shots down in that landscape at the right time of day, they can look really beautiful if it's not cloudy or rainy, and when the sun is setting, it makes for, really nice cinematography. There were a lot of wide shots of like a car sitting on the road, or, shots of Hamer and Galt just standing in a field somewhere, or just sitting in a car, near sunset in a southern field. John Lee Hancock always used these, beautiful, wide shots that were just, so nice to look at, almost like looking at a painting. And I feel like that's important in a movie, especially when it has a very slow and non-exciting premise. And I can't believe I'm saying that the premise was slow and unexciting, given that this is the hunt for Bonnie and Clyde, you know? But other than the slow tone, the cinematography was really beautiful. And one of the other things I didn't like is, wasn't the music kind of ridiculous too? The music was a little mellow.
Yeah, there were some parts that actually really liked the music. I think it worked well in some parts. Other parts it didn't. You're right, it is a little mellow at some points. But yeah, I didn't mind it too much. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
and plus the score was written by Thomas Newman. I don't know if you heard that name, Thomas Newman. He scored a lot of films. He is not one of my favorites, though. He scored the last two James Bond movies, Skyfall and Spectre.
Okay.
The musical score in those movies, in my opinion, are terrible. I mean, compared to David Arnold's score in Casino Royale, the horns and the trumpets in that movie are, very loud in a very flamboyant 1960s spy-like way, kind of like the Incredibles movies are. And, the fact that he didn't bring that style to Skyfall and Spectre is really disappointing. And, but the Highwaymen shows that his style of music, doesn't fit a serious or iconic subject matter in most cases. I mean, there were like soft pianos in parts.
Yeah.
There was very little usage of like Southern musical sounds.
Exactly.
There were in some parts, but were there? I can't even remember.
There was a little bit here and there. I think kind of like during when they were chasing the I can't remember his character's name, but like the redheaded boy. I think it was like a little bit Southern flair there. Other than that, yeah, I kind of agree. Score's a little bland.
Yeah, a little too bland. But going back to the point of the cinematography, there was one aspect of the cinematography that I actually liked. They drive these old Ford cars in the movie, and they kept, especially in the beginning, there were these frequent close-ups of the Hound figurehead on the car. And
I did
that's
like that.
yeah, that's speaking with, cinematic language. Kevin Costner is Hamer, Woody Harrelson is Galt, and the Hound figurehead symbolizes how they're both bloodhounds in the search for Bonnie and Clyde. And when cinematography speaks with cinematic language, that's really nice. So it really is a shame that the rest of the movie was kind of imperfect. I mean, the seriousness of the subject matter was like really understated. But then again, there were occasional quips in the movie. I feel like they could have like used that a little more because, Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're big names. One scene I found particularly cool was where they were in this bar that was like loaded with a lot of people who are loyal to Bonnie and Clyde. And while Woody Harrelson's, in the bathroom, these guys try to, rough him up and he beats them all up. And,
I did like that scene. That was very cool.
Yeah, he said something like, you don't mess with a former Texas Ranger. That was like one of the few fun parts in the movie where you recognize, the legendary backgrounds of Hamer and Galt, And my argument is that, through most of the movie, it felt like it was about two guys and a bunch of other people who only had hopes of catching Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
Like, the seriousness of the movie was not identified very well. I recall some of my favorite Western movies, like, High Noon from the 50s, or even Tombstone from the 90s. I mean, the villains of that movie posed serious threats, especially in the West, and they exemplified the seriousness of that threat, and the characters realized the serious measures that they had to take in order to stop all of it, and I just didn't have that kind of feel with this movie.
Yeah, I think it mostly comes from the pacing of the movie as well. And, because I feel like, Hamer and Galt, didn't feel like they were in a rush. They're kind of like, oh, we'll go out here. Maybe we'll catch them. Maybe we won't. Kind of like you said,
Yeah.
I wish they kind of gave them a little bit more urgency and also kind of more so went into like their Texas Ranger kind of backstory and gave them that extra flair. I think it really would have helped improve their characters overall.
It would. And Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson have played very, funny, witty characters in the past. I felt that they were really, misused in this film. I mean, they could have done like so much more. And I don't think those two were ever in a movie together before this. I mean, the fact that they had them both together, they could have worked out some more humorous moments. They did have some humorous moments, and I think overusing the humor would have been bad too, given the serious subject matter that wasn't exemplified. But, still, this movie could have been a whole lot better. And my other problem with the movie is that, they would show Bonnie and Clyde occasionally from these extreme wide shots where they would kill cops on the road. But the thing is, they would occasionally show up in the same scene as Hamer and Galt. But whenever they did, it just happened, so casually. Here they come. There was no epic build-up through cinematography or, riveting music. In one scene, Woody Harrelson's character, Galt, he's trying to, go to the bathroom in the back of a building, and they drive in, and he tries to take them down, but he doesn't get a chance to because the crowds come up, to honor them and talk to them and get themselves all over them. But there was no build up to that moment. And I'm like, wait, what's happening here? I don't feel like scared or intimidated at all. I don't feel that excitement as a film viewer.
Yeah, I didn't get that moment. Like, what's going to happen? I just kind of like, oh, it's a car pulling in. It's like, oh, yeah. I didn't really realize it was Bonnie and Clyde till that crowd started going crazy. It's like, it wasn't that, you're right, that oomph, that build up that they really needed to kind of accentuate the film.
Yeah, I think they were trying to go for some kind of bland artistic tone, but given this certain historical storyline, I just don't think it was working.
Yeah, I know they said it was based off a true story, and maybe they really stuck to that, but I think they needed to kind of add some extra flair and some extra, I guess, falsitivity, if you will, to kind of just make it more entertaining.
Yeah, we really needed it in this case. I mean, it almost feels like a Western in that sense. We don't consider it the West anymore, especially in terms of like the early 1900s. We consider it the South. I mean, that area of the country is, so full of, violent legend and, all these cunning stories in a sense. I mean, they had so much to work with, and I feel like they just missed out on it. It was so disappointing. But I will say that seeing Kathy Bates play the governor of Louisiana was
That was
great. I
satisfying.
mean, she was perfect for the role. She always
was.
plays characters like that. But yeah, it was good to see her in those brief parts of the movie where they showed her, and her hiring them was pretty sweet. So this movie did have some good aspects. I just feel like they, missed out on a lot of things, given the stars and the story, and and they focused a lot too on how the people considered Bonnie and Clyde Robin Hood figures, and in the end, where they were finally taken down, there was no sense of celebration or triumph. What do you have to say about that? Because it seemed like that was kind of mellow too. What do you think of like the end and everything?
Yeah, the ending was interesting. I personally kind of thought it was interesting how they actually did kind of talk about like the support that Bonnie and Clyde actually had, because I really didn't know that,
Yeah.
like real life. But yeah, the ending, it was odd, It thought to be like some like, not necessarily excitement for killing people. I mean, that sounds wrong.
Yeah.
But like some like, like we did it, kind of like, like we can sleep easy tonight. But there was nothing. It was very, very mellow. All the characters were like very somber, and
Yeah.
it was just I wish it was just slightly different, a little bit more excitement,
Yeah, it's important to know if the filmmakers really want to establish Bonnie and Clyde's reputations as vicious murderers through this film. And I feel like they were, but I feel like that John Lee Hancock and the other makers of the movie and the other producers, they should have made that intent more concrete and less understated, because when they were finally taken down, there was sad music, and they showed them driving their car through the streets with their dead bodies in it, and everyone's so upset, and there's this sad music going, and they showed the real footage at the end of the site where they shot them, and they say how many people went to their funeral, and they show the old shots of their funeral from that time, which was very interesting. But that almost felt like they were trying to honor them in a sense. I mean, this is not something to feel sad about. These were vicious criminals. They had to be taken down. And I feel like this movie is trying to establish them as bad people, but like I just said, they should have made that more concrete. And there was a movie made years ago, I don't remember exactly when, but it was made years ago, where they were totally romanticized. The main characters were these great people, and they made them look good. So Bonnie and Clyde have really been misrepresented in entertainment throughout the years, and they almost did a good job in The Highwaymen of making them look bad, but I just think they should have done a better job.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there wasn't that like factor that made him kind of like, I don't want to, like badass in a sense. I didn't really get that feeling of like, oh, they're really cool, they're this or that. I kind of felt like they weren't posing too much of a serious threat,
right?
Based on what we saw, because there was not really a build up through like the cinematography.
What's even more disappointing in a sense now that I think about it? I mean, Kevin Costner is the star of the movie. I mean, this is Kevin Costner we're talking about here, the mastermind behind Dances with Wolves from 25, 30 years ago. I mean, that was an incredible movie. Kevin Costner really knows how to capture drama, action, and emotion. And I just can't help but think, if he directed this movie, it would have been amazing. I think he would have understood the subject matter a little well and given it the kind of, riveting, dramatic emotion that it deserved. Have you seen Dances with Wolves at all?
I have not, actually.
I saw it years ago. It's a beautiful story, a beautiful movie, and I don't think Kevin Costner has directed a movie like in a long time, but I will say Kevin Costner does recognize the importance of cinematic language and making a good movie. And I just feel like that if he directed this movie, he would have knocked it out of the park. I forgot what else John Lee Hancock directed, but I just don't think he necessarily did a good job. I mean, considering how vicious Bonnie and Clyde actually were. But I do appreciate the shots in the movie where they showed them killing the cops, and that was important.
I did like that. Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. Like like the following shot of like Bonnie with like her gimp walking over. I thought that was kind of cool. It kind of like added some suspense to the scene.
Yeah, and I don't think this was the first shot. I at least think it was like one of the first shots of them like killing cops, which are horrible scenes, but they needed to be shown to show how bad they were. There was this man, I think, in his farm or his house, going out to do something, and they were showing his view from the road next to his house as, they were killing the cops, and, they combined a full shot, with extreme wide shot of them killing the cops. I think they kind of combined both the guy and Bonnie and Clyde killing the cops in the same shot, which was, very intriguing, and that's the kind of intense excitement I'm talking about. It was very occasional, and it was very brief, and I just think, it was totally imperfect in that sense. But yeah, given all that they had to work with, Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson, I think they deserved a lot more. And if you think about it, they haven't done much in the past. They're not in much anymore, and that's kind of disappointing. I can't think of the last thing Woody Harrelson has done. I think
the last thing he did was Solo, a Star Wars story.
Solo, a Star Wars story.
That movie didn't do too well, so.
Yeah, I know. See, these guys, they're doing all these little roles because, everyone's considering them old and they can't do anything anymore, which is unfair. Yeah, they're legends.
Great actors.
They're legends, but But yeah, the last movie I saw Kevin Costner in, like the last truly great movie that he starred in was 12 years ago. It was a movie called The Guardian. Did you see that movie?
I have not.
It's Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher. It's about the Coast Guard. He loses a partner in the beginning, so they send him to a school to teach Coast Guard students so he can, get over the tragedy. And Ashton Kutcher is one of the students. And it's a great movie all about, the Coast Guard and the morality behind the Coast Guard. That movie is a perfect example of, emotional drama and intensity, and given all the movies I've seen in the past, it's really hard to enjoy a movie that has a great subject that you want to like, but it's just like so flawed.
Yeah.
It's really, I really don't know what to think about it, but I just really think The Highwaymen could have been better. Netflix makes a lot of good content if you think about it. Netflix has the potential to produce some good quality content, and I just feel like they really missed out with The Highwaymen.
They really did, because I think it was such an interesting plot. When I first kind of read the description, saw a trailer, I'm like, oh, this can be really, really good, but then, it just fell a little flat.
Yeah, and I would have been okay with it if the mood of the first act weren't continued. We all talk about, the 3-act structure in, the world of film. Act 1 is where you're introduced to the problem. Act 2 is where the problem intensifies. And Act 3 is, the big climax or whatever, where the problem is solved. This movie felt like the entire first act was just prolonged throughout the entire thing.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
I know, nothing intensified. This movie was just The Highwaymen Act 1 throughout the entire thing. I think the professors here at St. Rose would have a lot to say about that because we have some great professors here at St. Rose. They would say some good things about that movie. Not good things, but good things in terms of how the 3-act structure needs to be better created in the future, because I think, it's really important. But yeah, I'm just so disappointed because I love the whole theme of, the South and the West. I mean,
I
that's
love
just
Westerns.
I know it's just a legendary period, and a lot of Westerns throughout the years haven't exemplified that intensity. Like, I love this Western that was made in 2015 called Forsaken with both Kiefer and Donald Sutherland. That had some great action and great dialogue, but the intensity could have been a little better in that one too, even though it was not as bad as The Highwaymen. And Ed Harris and Viggo Mortensen did this Western 10 years ago called Appaloosa. Have you seen that one?
I haven't, no.
That was pretty bland too, even though Ed Harris brilliantly directed it. There's like no sense of intensity. That theme of, the West and the legend of the West, it's just gone, and no one cares for it anymore, and I think it's really sad.
Yeah, and they're just not doing it justice either, so no one can really care for it anymore. It's not going to be good,
I think the Coen brothers definitely did it justice, though, in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Oh, yeah, I heard that's very good.
That movie does capture a lot of drama and emotion when it comes to the West, but in a little bit of a darker way, like only the Coen brothers can do, but still, that was a little better than The Highwaymen, I have to say, because you really feel the drama of that movie. And it got a few accolades, too, like even Best Original Song.
Oh, wow.
A song from that was, really heartfelt, and it talked about how, only in death can men really accept each other. A song called When a Cowboy Trades His Spurs for Wings is a really good song. If you want to watch the movie, I won't spoil the plot line. I'll let you know the background behind that.
Yeah, I gotta watch it.
The sad thing is the majority of Southern/Western theme movies these days aren't, given the proper heart or the proper treatment, and I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, it really is. Because Westerns have the potential to be so good, and they were so good, back in the day, and I think even now they can be even better with, the technological advancements and, the just advancements in the film world, but they just really haven't, I don't think, hit that mark. At least a lot of them haven't hit that mark.
Yeah, the last great Western, in my opinion, was really 1993's Tombstone, which is about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. It's more than just the gunfight, the OK Corral, too. It's about their efforts to, rid the West of the crime in the South, and the West. There was this group of abandoned outlaws from the North called the Cowboys. They were just wreaking havoc, and they had to resort to just going to kill them all to, stop all the crime that was going on. So, and that movie was very powerful. The quips are very powerful, and there's a lot of jokes in it too. And it's an amazingly done movie, and The Highwaymen just could have done so much with that formula, because Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer play Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and their acting is legendary. Their quips are so, quotable. Like, me and my family, we all quote that movie. I grew up with them quoting that movie. Tombstone is a really special, iconic movie. It's known for its quips and its triumph, but I really wish The Highwaymen used that. Can you think of any Westerns you've seen that you wish this movie emulated a little more?
Maybe even like The Searchers in some sense.
Yeah.
That's a very, very old movie. I believe 1940s, maybe 50, something around
55, I think.
Yeah. I really like that a lot. I thought the cinematography was great. The setting was great. And it did, there wasn't too much action in it, even like The Highwaymen, but it still had that sense of adventure that I think The Highwaymen could have benefited from if there was not, that lack of action, which there was. And, obviously it was a John Wayne. But Yeah, I think if they just included that and kind of like that aspect of adventure and kind of like searching, hence the name, the searches like they did in The Highwaymen, I think it could have been much better. Even like, I don't even call this a Western, but like Django Unchained. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't
But
seen that yet.
Tarantino, it's kind of like in a Western as well. Very good movie, Also, again, not that much action, but had that sense of adventure, that sense of kind of curiosity of when we are going to, catch like X person. Won't spoil it for you, but, I think The Highwaymen just could have used that formula a little better and, really applied it and would have been great.
What I really think is that, the people that Netflix hires to make movies, all the directors, writers, and producers, I think they're so focused on, this dark experimental formula that they think everybody wants to see, this dark experimental formula. And that's not everybody's cup of tea. It only works for some things. And only for some TV shows as well. It only works for some TV shows, some movies. I mean, it works for things like, Stranger Things and, but I saw this post-apocalyptic thriller on Netflix called I.O. There was no sense of urgency or intensity in that movie either, and that was really disappointing. And while we're on the subject of The Highwaymen, I can't believe it took me this long to bring it up. Have you seen the Netflix original show Longmire at all?
I have not.
That show just ended, unfortunately. It had a very successful 6 seasons. It had an incredible run, and I'm sad it's over, but that show is incredible. I mean, Longmire's an old school sheriff in this Wyoming county. He always has to fight threats like these. And the drama in that show and the intensity of the evil situations that they have to fight is amazing. I mean, The Highwaymen exemplified that kind of formula so much that they could have gone in that direction. Because Longmire's played by this Australian actor named Robert Taylor, and his acting's just incredible. And he is a nice guy. He's nice and, sympathetic when he wants to be. But when it comes to doing his job, he's very rough and tough and very hardcore. He's a very old school sheriff. He doesn't even use a cell phone.
Oh, wow.
And I know, it's incredible. And when it comes to catching, Bonnie and Clyde, you want to know that the people hunting them down are people who really care about their job and really want to catch them. And they did exemplify it in parts. They didn't totally abandon it, but we really need that sense of, we got to catch them. Let's do this. The audience needs to feel a sense of, inspiration. We don't need to feel totally melancholy. We know Bonnie and Clyde do bad things, but we need to feel motivated that they will be brought down.
Yeah, I kind of felt like Hamer and Gold, they didn't really like want to get back out there. It's almost like they were like put in like this position, almost had to in a sense. Didn't feel like any like need of like urgency.
Right.
And I wish they just had that and even went, deeper with like, the whole Texas Ranger backstory, because I think it would have been so good if really like included that in their character arc.
Right, yeah. Plus, it had been a long time since they were Texas Rangers, too. Like, Hamer was having those kids throw bottles in the sky so he could shoot them. He only got one of them, which was the last one. So the thing is, they were also rusty, too. They hadn't done it in a long time. Overall, pretty flawed movie, but in a sense, I am glad that they did make The Highwaymen, because it is still an important subject matter. And for film students like you and I, and for people who are about to go into the film business, I think this movie serves as a good example on how we can make that historical storytelling formula better. Because not every movie can be perfect, but we need to let that serve as a lesson to us on how we can make the story more exciting, because we want the viewers to be enticed, and especially in this age of streaming movies, we need those streams.
Yeah, I agree. I think this movie is great in the sense of cinematography. I think, if you want to learn cinematography, especially in like, a Western sense, watch it. I think they did a great job, but I definitely agree with what you said, kind of shows you what almost not to do in a sense for like based on true stories,
Yeah. But yeah, I know it's important to, keep that historical storytelling formula alive. I mean, it needs to be strong, because history is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. I mean, I used to be a history major and I didn't really enjoy it, but I love history in the movies, especially when it's interesting and when it's, done right. And outside from the Western genre, you think of historical thrillers like Braveheart.
Oh, yeah.
Dances with Wolves. What are some others? What others have you seen? They can't come to my head right now, but yeah, there's Dances with Wolves, Braveheart.
I'm blanking.
Yeah, I know. There's so many I've seen, but they just can't come to my head right now. There's many I love. And there's even the Hollow Crown. It's a BBC show. It's got people like Ben Whishaw, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Tom Hiddleston. They're all about William Shakespeare's plays about all the kings of England during events like the 100 Years' War and stuff like that, and the Wars of the Roses. And even though they're adaptations of Shakespearean plays, the way the history is presented is amazing. And I think they truly are the most realistic depictions of medieval England that we'll ever see. The sets are incredibly realistic. The armor is not cheesy. And the acting is, just incredible. And I think through those icons, it's very important to make history enticing. And that's why I love Braveheart so much. The lifestyle of, the Scottish people is, very enticing. I think the British armor is very cheesy in that, old-fashioned 20th century way. But then again, it's not about the British. They're the bad guys in that movie. So, yeah, but Mel Gibson masterfully directed Braveheart, and Kevin Costner masterfully directed Dances with Wolves, and so many great historical movies have been made. I don't know why they can't come to my mind right now. Maybe I'm super stressed out because of my work, but but I think historical films are going through a big slump, and I think it's kind of sad. History tells a story, and that's why a lot of historians find it intriguing. But there is a great Netflix show out called Roman Empire. They made 2 seasons of it right now. They're working on a third. Season 1 is on Commodus. Season 2 is on Caesar. And Season 3 is going to be on the worst of them all, Caligula.
Oh.
And it's a very intriguing show. It features acting and interviews with historians. It's a brilliantly produced show, and it's realistic, too, and Sean Bean narrates them.
Oh, wow.
And I think through the usage of all those things, it makes the history enticing. Like, when I first watched the show, I almost felt, bored. I don't have time for history. But then watching it, I just got, sucked in. The guy who plays Caesar, an Australian actor named Ditch Davey, is amazing. And when you got Sean Bean's narration, who's on Game of Thrones,
Exactly.
I mean, how can you go wrong? But
I agree.
But I think The Highwaymen could have used a little more intimidation in its production.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's so important to conserve history and kind of retell it. Like you said, history tells a story. It's important to tell that, but I think we're gonna tell it. We need to do it justice, and I don't necessarily know and think that The Highwaymen did that.
Yeah, I really don't think The Highwaymen served justice fully. I think it did serve justice in a sense, but the end didn't really feel victorious. It was too melancholy. Like I said, I know people consider them Robin Hood figures and love them, but in this day and age, we know now that that's not the case. I mean, we don't live in that age anymore. We know the things that they did, and we can't show any of the sadness from the people who really loved Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, we can't depict that on film anymore. We don't live in that day and age anymore. In our sophisticated age now, we know the facts that they were vicious criminals and that needed to be interpreted a little more accurately. It did show them as vicious criminals, but the end didn't make that as concrete as they should have. But like I said before, imperfect movies teach people like you and I a lesson. People like us who are about to go in the film business, it serves as a lesson to us on how we need to make the formula better and how we need to tell those historical stories better in the future.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I still enjoyed watching it. I did.
I did too. Yeah.
I think mostly because of cinematography and stuff like that. And the cast, I think obviously it was a great cast. I mean,
Yeah, great cast.
I definitely think, again, they could have just hit a couple more marks, and it really would have been. I think they had such potential to be incredible, but it just didn't get there.
Yeah, great cast, great cinematography, but imperfect storytelling.
Right.
But hey, in the future, maybe we'll get something better. I certainly hope we do.
I do too.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really had a blast talking about this movie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hope to have you on again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Once again, I'm Alan Hills, and this has been Cutting to the Chase. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week.